chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and you're watching In the Community with Tau Omega.
In history, in service, in sisterhood, in the community with Tau Omega.
Hello, my name is Wendy Malliet, and I'm a member of Tau Omega Chapter, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and I'm the coordinator for a healthy aging program. Today we're going to talk about healthy aging, what to expect as you age, and what you can do to ensure that you age healthy. I'm sitting here with Dr. Alyson Myers, the attending endocrinologist and medical director of the intensive diabetes team at North Shore University Hospital, and she's an assistant professor at Hofstra School of Medicine. Through the years, as I've gone to doctors and I go and I complain about my aches and pains, I've been told that it's because of my age. Could you talk to us about what happens as you age, say in your 20s, your 40s, and your 60s, Dr. Myers?
Sure. So you bring up the topic of bones. So as we age, in our 20s, that's when we hit our maximal bone density. So as you reach 30 and onward, you notice that your bones will not be as dense as they once had been, and that's why we start to look for osteoporosis in women as they go through menopause, because that's a time of loss of estrogen. In addition, you also will notice as you age and going through menopause, you'll have other changes, like you'll feel more fatigued. You notice that you might all of a sudden have a sudden weight gain because of those changes in estrogen as you go from those 20s to those 50s. Also, as we get older, we notice that bones start to ache more because a lot of people will tend to develop arthritis. So what normally happens is, rather than having two bones on top of each other, we usually have cartilage overlying bones, and that helps to prevent the grinding. But over time, that cartilage gets damaged, and as a result, you can also get osteoarthritis, also known as arthritis, as we get older.
So are there certain screenings that we should have done to help us determine if we have any of these conditions?
Absolutely. So in our 20s, typically the things that we always want to talk about is our sexual health. So we want to do screenings for sexually transmitted infections such as HIV, gonorrhea, and chlamydia. We also want to screen females for with pap smears to look for high-grade HPV, which places women at risk for cervical cancer. In addition, we also want to look for things such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, because right now we have an obesity epidemic here in America. So we're having people younger and younger developing these diseases such as hypertension, high cholesterol, and diabetes. Also, as we go into our 30s, we will continue to screen for the sexual health things that are mentioned, as well as the diabetes, hypertension, and lipids. Then when we reach the 40s, then we start to do some more screening for cancers. So for example, women, we have to get mammograms, and we need to also get breast exams as well to be screened for breast cancer, and that generally will start in the 40s. In some rare cases, there might be women who start younger, but again, this is something you need to speak with your doctor about because it's depending on your family history and your other medical conditions. Another thing that we'll screen for in the 40s is prostate cancer in men, which is performed by your primary care doctor or your urologist, in which they will do what's called a digital rectal exam to screen for any prostate abnormalities. And in some cases, they may also do a blood test to follow up on that. Also, colon cancer, typically we screen at the age of 50, but if you have a first-degree relative, which is a parent or a sibling who's had a colon cancer at a young age, or you have a history of inflammatory bowel disease such as Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, or if you're of African American race, you will actually get the screening earlier. So they actually now recommend for African Americans to start screening at the age of 45. And for those other conditions, very often you'll have to be screened in your 40s as well.
Thank you. It's quite a bit of information that you've given us, Dr. Myers. Could you tell us, they say that you should know your numbers. What are the appropriate numbers that we should be aware of?
Okay, that's a very good thing. So as we get older, earlier I had mentioned the bones, you need to know your bone density. So that's very important. So when most women over the age of 65 and most men over the age of 70, that's when we do screening for osteoporosis. So usually we want to see how dense are the bones, okay? And in some cases, we actually will have to do the screenings earlier, and that's why people need to speak to their doctor because it's a very individualized process. But for the most part, it's age 65 for women or 70 for men. And so you have a certain score that you get, and if you fulfill that criteria, then we diagnose you with osteoporosis. And so usually the score that we will use is negative 2.5. And again, this is a number that you would need to discuss with your doctor because there are actually cases of people whose number is not that high that we would go ahead and treat. So you need to really speak to your doctor about that before proceeding. Another number that's important to know is your blood pressure. So if your blood pressure is greater than 140/90, then that puts you in the category of having high blood pressure. So you would also need to talk to your doctor about that because you need to probably make some diet changes, cutting back on salt, as well as speaking about medication options to get your blood pressure down. In terms of cholesterol, cholesterol can vary because it depends on your other comorbid conditions. So if you have hypertension, as well as diabetes, and you're at greater risk for a heart attack, you may have a much lower target than someone who doesn't have a lot of medical conditions. So it's again a conversation you would need to have with your doctor about what's the right number for you. In terms of diabetes, it's pretty standardized. We diagnose diabetes when your fasting blood sugar is greater than 126, or the test called the hemoglobin A1C is greater than 6.5%. The hemoglobin A1C is nice because you don't have to be fasting to do it, and it gives us a 2 to 3 month average of what your blood sugars have been doing. And if it's greater than 6.5%, then you fall into the diabetes range. If we can catch you early in what people often call the pre-diabetes range, that's great too because you can actually reverse that if you make the correct changes to your diet as well as add exercise to your regimen if you're not already exercising. The diagnosis of pre-diabetes is if your hemoglobin A1C is between 5.7 and 6.4%, or if your fasting blood sugar is between 100 and 125.
Oh, good. Thank you very much, Dr. Myers. You've given us some very helpful information. And I understand that you, as the health chair of Tau Omega chapter, are planning some events. Could you talk to us about the events, the upcoming events?
Yes. On the topic of heart health, we have what we call Pink Goes Red. That will be happening in February. And what we'll be doing that day is providing information about stroke awareness, as well as providing screenings for blood pressure as well as diabetes. And we will have health professionals on staff there to answer your questions.
Oh, good. Thank you. Those are very good programs. And I thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me this evening. And you've shared a lot of information that will be helpful to our audience members. And we hope that they will take this information and make the appropriate changes, if necessary, in their lifestyle so that they can age healthy. Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Wendy Malliet, and I'm a member of Tau Omega Chapter, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and I'm the Healthy Aging Program Coordinator. Unfortunately, sometimes we experience health challenges or know someone who has, and it's well known that the attitude that one goes into facing these challenges has an effect on its outcome. Today, we're fortunate to have with us Desiree Walker, a survivor extraordinaire, a 2-time breast cancer survivor, a health educator, a patient advocate, and a support group facilitator. Desiree, you were diagnosed with breast cancer at an early age, in your 30s. Could you please tell us what led to that diagnosis?
At the time of my diagnosis, my employer offered on-site mammographies. And so because I thought it was a perk, and I always tried to take advantage of the perks that were offered, I had been doing mammograms for about 3 years. This particular year, I received a phone call suggesting that I come in for additional film. And when I went in, I was told not to leave until the radiologist had sat down and spoken to me. And when he called me into a room, he had basically had my film over the past 3 years. And he said to me, as he showed me the film, he said, "You have calcifications. Calcifications are very common. However, when we see them change in shape and size, it's a red flag." And so at that particular point, he said, "I want you to have a biopsy." And he said to me, "Do you understand what I've said to you?" And I said, "Yes, you said I need to have a biopsy." And he said to me, "But I don't mean 6 months from now. I don't mean a year from now. I mean right away." And that gave me a sense of urgency that oftentimes I think when we are told to follow up, we don't, because we think, well, we can do it later because we're busy. And so with that particular situation, I then said to him, "Can you help me find a place to have a biopsy?" And I had the biopsy done. And eventually that doctor that did it called me to say, "You have breast cancer."
So as a result of your diagnosis and treatment, you've become an avid advocate. Could you talk to us about the kinds of things that one should do in order to stay on top of their health?
Well, I think actually it all starts or should start when we're young. Oftentimes, when I do my outreach in the African American community, I encourage people to speak to the matriarchs and patriarchs in their family to find out what their family medical history is. Because many of us are predisposed to many illnesses that usually occur as we age. And it's often important, if you know you have a predisposition to a particular disease, you could make certain lifestyle adjustments early on to either reduce your risk or eliminate the risk of having a particular disease. And so I always encourage people to know what their medical history is, because oftentimes when you go to the doctor for the first time, they usually give you a questionnaire to fill out. And many people fill it out not really very thoughtful because they figure it's a waste of time. But the truth of the matter is that when you present symptoms, the doctor usually looks at that questionnaire to see whether this is something that you've had before or whether or not there's a family history of that. And if there isn't, some doctors will not go the extra step to rule out an illness or a disease because you don't have a history of it. So I think that it's really important that we are very mindful that what you do today does impact tomorrow. And young people who often feel that they're invincible because they're young should actually, think about what they do. So in terms of, one's diet, how healthy you eat today can actually impact, whether or not you have certain health challenges tomorrow. It also can be compiled with whether you have a family history of certain diseases, your lifestyle in terms of diet, whether you're obese, whether you exercise. These are all things that we ought to think about early on because habits are easy to form but hard to break. And so what often happens is that we're so accustomed of doing the wrong thing that when something happens and the doctor says, well, you really can't eat this anymore, people then get very disjointed and feel that life is not worth it because they're now sacrificing so much. But if you adopt certain behaviors early on, you're able to cope better when you have to make certain adjustments if it's a life or death situation.
So tell us, how do you stay on top of your health? You want to tell us a little more specifics?
Well, for me, I started off, I thought I was one of those individuals who exercised and ate right and was doing all that I could do to be healthy. But unfortunately, at the age of 38, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. That was a rude awakening for me because I didn't know any other young women with the disease, and I had always thought that it was an older woman's disease. And so I had to start educating myself more on the disease because it now was going to be part of my life. It wasn't going to be something that once I had treatment, it was over. It was a continuation. And so as a result of that, I made modifications to my diet, which I thought was already good, but I started to explore organic food because one of the things that I never really focused a lot on was the fact that many foods that we have in terms of the fruits and vegetables especially usually are laden with pesticides, and pesticides actually are toxins, and they can actually have a negative impact, and there are some associations with environmental exposures and breast cancer. In addition to that, I started to be more mindful of the fish that I eat. To know what waters the fish swim in, because many fish swim in waters that are high in mercury. Mercury is not our friend either. And to also be mindful of, the poultry, or even if I do have meat now and then, how are they raised? In terms of, are they being fed antibiotics and other things that are just not helpful to the immune system. I try to make sure that I focus, on exercise as well. There are certain times of the year I could probably do more than less, like winter. I tend to do less and need to do more. But in summertime, I'm like, oh. But I try to make sure that I exercise as well. But one of the things that I also think that is not spoken enough about, but does play a role, and it touches on something you spoke about earlier, is one's attitude or one's mental health. I think that we don't really talk enough about mental health in our culture, and it's something that is important for us to do, because how you feel mentally does actually affect your immune system. And one of the things that I think we don't talk about is toxins in the environment is one thing, but toxic relationships are another. And so being mindful of what you surround yourself with, both physically, emotionally, can play an important role. And I have actually, over the years since my diagnosis, have tried to be more mindful of my interactions and what's not healthy for me, whether it's food, whether it's people, but, just things in the environment all the way around.
You've spoken some very powerful words, Desiree, and I thank you for those. Is there anything else that you think that you'd like to share with us today about either your journey or health in general?
One of the things that I, for me also, I think that there's a lot of misinformation in our community, but I also think that, fear is something that many of us hold on to because we may not necessarily have all of the facts. And so I always encourage people to try and educate yourself and inform yourself of the facts, and not necessarily focus on the many myths and misconceptions that exist, not only as it relates to cancer, but other diseases that impact our community as well. I also, like to say that it's really important for us to advocate for ourselves. I usually tend to speak more to women to say that, we are caregivers and we are nurturers, but we do a very poor job as it relates to ourselves. Right, yes. Oftentimes, a mother will fight tooth and nail for her children, but when you call and tell her she needs to do something for herself, it becomes the back burner. And so I always encourage, women to care for themselves. Self-care is very important. And if you really want to be the best caregiver and nurturer that you can be, you have to start with self. And you have to let yourself be an example to your loved ones as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Desiree. I appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with me tonight. We will have on the screen, Desiree is involved with a lot of different organizations and programs, and we will have on the screen a list of the different programs that she's involved with. And as Desiree mentioned, nutrition is important, and exercise is important. So stay tuned. We may have some information for you on those subjects as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Vivian Kurutz and I am the director of the Harlem Wellness Center. We are a nonprofit health and wellness center, and our mission is to educate, motivate, and support lifelong healthy living practices. The key words there are lifelong. So not a kick, not a fad, but gaining the tools for a sustainable lifelong journey of health. We do that in many ways through exercise classes that include strength training, yoga, Zumba, body conditioning, and Pilates, and also we do nutrition workshops and special seminars to motivate and support and encourage. And we wrap all of that around in a community setting, because we know that getting to know your neighbors and building relationships strengthens our support system and inspires us to go on this journey that can sometimes be challenging. Strengthening the bones, the power of exercise. worried about your budget and you think that exercising has to be an expensive venture, going to gyms and hiring trainers, just know that there are community organizations and city programs that allow people to exercise and get their activity in an affordable way. And the Harlem Wellness Center, harlemwellness.org, is one of those places. So thank you so much for listening today, and I hope that you have a little piece of information and a seed to want to take care of yourself and deposit into your bank account for your future. And if you'd like some support, come on to the friendliest studio in New York and we'll be there.